Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read chapter 12, S55083, Amistad, chapter 12 to chapter 13, chapter 14, and chapter 15. Captain Fitzgerald speaks. Sink returned to his chair, feeling sick and worried. His story was true, every word. But perhaps the lawyers didn't think that it was. But we now called the second man to speak to the court. His name was Captain Fitzgerald, a British captain who knew about the slave ship, the Ticora. He knew the sort of things that happened to people on that ship. Sometimes we stop slave ships, said Fitzgerald. If the kidnappers think that we're going to catch them, they often throw all the prisoners into the sea. There's no proof of what they have done. That's what we did now, said Baldwin. Proof of what happened. The Singh described it on the Ticora. He pulled out the papers that they found on the Amistad. He knew that there was proof in these papers, but he said nothing. Fitzgerald took the papers and looked at them. But look, said Fitzgerald, said, what's this? They changed the number of slaves on the ship. After this date, there were 50 slaves, fewer than when the journey began. My guess is that sailors on the Ticora didn't have enough food and water for the journey, so they threw 50 people into the sea. Sink wasn't listening to the people in the court now. He was thinking of his wife. He wanted to be with her and his children so young. And must they think of their father? He felt sick and so sad. His head was hurting. Suddenly, Sink stood up. He called out loudly in English, "Give us free." Everyone in the courtroom turned to look at him. How did he know these words? Time seemed to stop. Sir, Oliver said to the judge, he cannot shout like this while. Give us free. Judge Collins seemed too surprised to speak. Give us free. Sink said once more, quickly, before he calmly sat down. The next day, everyone stood when the judge came into the court. On this day, Judge Coughlin had to give his decision. Baldwin was not hopeful. He knew that a U.S. warship, the Grampus, was ready down by the water to take the prisoners back to Cuba. The president wanted them out of the country as soon as possible. He had other things to think about. I find that I agree with the government in many ways, said Coughlin. Secretary Forsyth looked pleased. Baldwin closed his eyes. But Coughlin said, and Baldwin's eyes opened, I am not sure about the information that Mr. Ruiz and Mr. Montes gave us. Is it true or not? Were these men born in Africa or not? The Coughlin repeated the question. It was clear that this was the only really important thing. He looked at the prisoners. Finally, he spoke. Yes, I think they were. People's mouths dropped open. They began to shout. And so these people do not belong to the Queen of Spain or to anyone. The government will take them back to their homes in Africa. Hold Mr. Lewis and Mr. Montes, he said to a policeman. Baldwin jumped out of his chair and threw his arms around Jason. He pointed to Sink and shouted to Covey, tell him. But before Covey could begin, Sink smiled. He understood they were finally, he thought, free. But he was wrong. The same night, Baldwin and Johnson rode again to the prison. They found Singh talking to Yamba Covey. They sat down at a table outside the prison. Slowly, Baldwin began to speak. Covey repeated his words. President, a big man wants your case to go to higher court. What does that mean? Asked Singh. It means that a different judge will have to decide the case again. No, shouted Singh. We had a decision. We are free. That's almost true. Almost. Almost. What sort of place is this? Where you almost mean what you say, where people are almost free? Singh pushed Baldwin away from him. These people's promises didn't mean anything. The sound of African voices singing a song came from inside the prison. John Quincy Adams was at home looking after his plants when he got Baldwin's letter. So we need you, the letter read. Your country needs you. This case is more important for America than I can describe. We can only win it With your help. Adams read the letter quickly. He thought about it for a minute, then he threw it away. When Baldwin arrived at the prison, Sink didn't want to talk to him. "I'm your only hope," said Baldwin. "We have to try again." Sink didn't even look at him. Neither of them spoke again until they heard a sound at the door. Baldwin turned and nearly fell off his chair. It was Adams. Chapter 13. Adams has a plan. Sink learned that Adams was once the big man of all America, but even before that, he knew that he was important. There was something special in his old eyes, in his calm voice, and in the way that others listened to him. Could Sink perhaps begin to hope again? During the next few weeks, Adams and Baldwin studied their law books in Adams' library. They didn't often stop to eat or sleep, and they spoke little. They had very little time. A few days before the High Court met to hear the case, Adams decided to talk to Sink. Sink stood at the door of Adams' house in chains, with guards on each side. "Take those chains off him," Adams ordered. They walked into the garden. Adams once a president, and Sink once a rich farmer. Adams showed Sink his flower. Sink was more interested than any of Adams' other visitors. They sat down to talk. With Kobe there to help, "I want to be honest with you," Adams said. "The job in front of us is very, very difficult." Sink said, "But there are others who can help us." "What? What do you mean?" Adams asked. "I mean my fathers and their fathers too," said Sink. "I will call into the past, back to when time began, and they will come and help me." He stopped and looked hard at the old man. They were both silent. Adams thought about Sink's words, and suddenly a plan came to him. Because of Sink's words, he knew what he had to say in court. A week later, the High Court opened to hear the case of the United States against the Amistad African for the last time. Chapter 14. At the High Court. Inside the court building in Washington, D.C., John Quincy Adams was getting ready for the case. There were 9 judges in the court. The judges in the center was called Judge Taney. 6 of the judges were from the South. 3 of them had slaves at home. All of them clearly knew what the president wanted. Adams felt old. His hand just shook, but he knew he had to win this case. It was the right thing to do. The court was full. As Adams stood up to speak, he felt that the world was looking at America. This is the most important case that has ever come to the court. It is about all men everywhere. It is about the right and natural way for men to live together. Adams went on to talk about the case, the Queen of Spain, the President, D Amistad, the grandpas. Then he says, some people, for example, our president, do not think that slavery is wrong. They think it is natural for some men to be slaves. I must say that I cannot agree. It is instead natural for men to be free. He looked at Sink, the only African in the court. We know how hard a man tries to be free when he is not. He will break his chains. He will kill his enemy. He will try to get home. Adams walked over to Sink and asked him to stand. He wanted everyone to look at the handsome young man. The room was silent. This man is black. We can all see that, but can we also see that he alone is the one great man in this room? In the past, we Americans were not free. We were almost like slaves to the British. Did we think this was right? No, we did not. We fought for our independence. The greatest men of our past are the men who fought and won independence for us. We teach our children about that. They are the fathers of our country. The pictures are on the walls of this courtroom. Adams pointed at pictures of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. Then he pointed at Sink. In the same way, this man here fought against the people who wanted to make him their slave. Why do we think he's wrong? Adams held up a piece of paper. His voice grew louder and stronger. These great men, Jefferson and Franklin, wrote this, the Declaration of Independence. If slavery is right, what must we do with this important piece of paper? The Declaration of Independence says that all men must be free. What should I do with this paper? Adams told the court about his conversation with Sink and Sink's words about his fathers. Adams looked up at the pictures on the wall, pictures of the men who fought for a free America. and pictures of a past president. There was a picture of his father, the second president of the United States. Then he spoke to the pictures. We need to be as strong and wise as you today, so that we are not afraid. Make us brave enough to do what is right, even if it means war in our country. And if it means war, we hope it'll be the last one in our fight for a new America. Adams turned and walked past the 9 judges. And that is all I have to say, he finished as he sat down. Outside the light, snow started to fall. The next morning, the courtroom was full. They all wanted to hear the decision about the Amistad African. The judge began to speak. Decision of the court is that these Africans are not slaves. They are nobody's property, but are free people. So we must return them to their homes in Africa, if that is what they choose. And with these words, the judge closed the case. The chain fell away from Singh's hand. What did you say? What word did you use? He asked Adams. Yours, was Adams' reply. The 2 men shook hands. Then Singh, Sir Joyson, and Baldwin, he walked over to them, offered his hand. Thank you, Singh said in English. Baldwin took his hand and pulled it toward his heart. BCA Sengbe, said Baldwin. It was evening, chapter 15, Africa called. Lombok, the slave factory where Singh's terrible journey began 2 years earlier. A guard was looking out to sea. He could see a ship, but he couldn't see what it was. When it came nearer, he saw it clearly. It was British. It was too late to warn the other guards. British sailors broke down the doors of the slave factory. They shot and killed the guards and the kidnapper. They broke open the prison. The prisons were full of Africans like Singh. They too were free. When everyone was out, the British ship pointed its great guns at building. In a very short time, it crashed, burning to the ground. The American ship, the gentleman was crossing the Atlantic, carrying the Africans back to their homes. Singh was standing at the front. He was watching the morning sun low in the sky, showing them their way. He heard his wife again, calling to him. A voice seemed to come from the land that lay before him, Africa. It was still too far away to see, but it was there, waiting for him. The end.